that. And I do want to do other nonfiction writing, but probably not about myself. Probably the next thing not about myself.
Can I get like a part 2 that picks up right at the end of this book?
Not right now, I mean, right? Yeah, eventually perhaps, in like 30 years.
Was there, I'm just watching your foot and getting lost in this. I think, when you talk to a lot of people about like, oh, I could never write a memoir, like everybody I know, like my parents would have to be dead and I would have to be 100 years old and, for me to tell the truth about my life or whatever. Was there, this is obviously, it's a memoir, it's a very personal memoir, and it also involves your family and it involves your friends and telling the truth also about how things about them and their lives very much impacted who you are and how you became who you are. How much of that were you fearful about that? Did you have consideration about that? Did you have to talk to people about that?
With Corin, so the manuscript was basically done when we set out on our No Cities to Love tour, which was in the first part of this year. And I read her many passages of the book that had to do with her, because there were elements of the book where I was sharing information that we had never talked to the press about. And I'm just watching this woman film these little segments. You're fine. And no, I'm waiting for you to film again, toss action. Anyway, so I did read things to Corin, and she was really happy about it. I was more nervous about her because it's such a, Corin figures very largely in this book, more than anyone, and in some ways I thought of it as a love letter to her, but sometimes people are creeped out by love letters, like a very common response to certain love letters. And then what I also realized as other people started reading it was that people are more offended by not being mentioned. Omission is its own form of communication, and wow, I will say that didn't happen so much with me, but as Jessica has referenced, there have been a lot of memoirs recently, and I know people that have been offended by not being in theirs, and so yeah, that was just as strange. And then the other thing, parents are very odd, maybe not yours, but most parents have these sort of eccentricities, and my father, who is, I write about in the book, his take on it, his first take was that he was worried about how squalid some of the places Sleater-Kinney stayed were. He felt so bad. My gosh, I didn't realize.
The pube mattress.
Yeah, the pube, that we had this egg crate foam mattress that we called the PM for pube magnet, because we would just drag it in and it would be on a floor in a disgusting house, and then it would collect stray hairs, and then we'd put it back in the van, and it was a collection of pubic hair from the United States. So my dad was so much more freaked out about those things. He had a fiduciary take on the book. He also wanted to know if he had lent me a credit card when we went to Australia. He's like, were we sharing a credit card at that point? We were still in college. It was so weird. And then of course he wanted to talk a little more from his heart about some of the other things in the book. But it's weird. You never know what people are going to be drawn to in the book. And for him, I found it kind of charming that he really read the book as my parent and was like, oh no, I should have paid for a hotel room for you guys.
In some ways, I did read the book. I think one of the very powerful things in the book, is sort of the ways that your story and Sleater-Kinney's story mirror each other, but then in some ways that your dad's story in some ways mirrors your own. And I think it's incredibly powerful. Can you talk a little bit about that? Or do you?
Well, I mean, yeah, I can, but what do you mean, that me and my father's story has a similar?
Like, just that it seems like that it's like, in the book there, sort of like, you know, you realizing and making whole some parts of yourself, and also with your dad.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that has been, this book, in the process of writing it, or especially after, because I think, like I said, in the writing of it, it felt so much like craftsmanship, but after, when I was really assessing a lot of the things in it, I realized how much affection and admiration I had for my father's journey. But basically, my dad realized he was gay when he was in his mid-50s, and came out to the family, and you know, that process, it was like all of a sudden he just had a light shone on him, and I felt like, oh, like, you have blood and bones and all these things that I didn't know you had, and because he was sort of closed off before, and I say in the book, like, he kind of got there before I did, you know, and I guess you always hope that with your parents, but it was just weird to watch, you know, him kind of just embracing a sense of self, and I say, you know, how intense it must have been to realize you have a body at 55, and I really just thought, I don't want to wait that long. I don't want to wait that long to feel embodied, like, you know, that's so hard. I just desire for no one to feel partial or small, and watching just this personal experience of seeing my dad feel small and less than, because he didn't really realize who he was. That kind of self-effacement to me is corrosive, and I don't always think that you really even know that you're doing it. Like, you can learn how to live as a shadow self and have that ape fulfillment, but, you know, hopefully you don't have to, or you work to stop erasing who you are, or surround yourself with people that don't like you, which is what I did.
One of the other things about the arc of the book is that it's very different than your traditional rock tell-all book. Like, there's not a point where you're, you know, on your private airplane with your, you know, the Eagles spelled out in cocaine, or like whatever.
Second book.
You know, forever like going like, God, I wish we could get back to the days where I was just playing a club in Florida and there was 4 people, and, you know, like, invariably it's always like, we want to get back to the simpler days, and that it's really triumphant in a lot of ways, but also that it's just, it disregards that sort of formula. And then, so it's kind of a twofold question. What I saw on your social media presence the other day, you in line to get Grace Jones' book signed by Grace Jones. Are you someone who loves music biographies at all, or were you just like, I'm here for Grace Jones?
I don't love music biographies. I read a lot, but I haven't read a lot of rock memoirs. Like, I will admit to having never read Hammer of the Gods, which is, no one even knows what that is in here, which is amazing. One guy. It's Led Zeppelin. It's a book about Led Zeppelin.
Rush spoke about
Or Motley Crue's Dirt, which famously has, I think, this could be totally apocryphal, but I think that there is a scene where they had already snorted so much cocaine that they ended up snorting ants. I'm pretty sure that exists in that book. So it's like, for some, basically, I guess my point is that for some rock memoirs, you don't even need to read the book. The most salacious stories like seep out into the world. And so, yeah, I hadn't read a lot. I read Just Kids by Patti Smith. I read Kim Gordon's book, but I was almost done with mine when I was reading hers. So no, I didn't. Like, that was not part of my tutelage, I guess. But I did. I love Grace Jones' music, and I actually happened to be in New York. I wanted to go because I thought there was an interesting excerpt of her book in Time Out London that I read, and, you know, she has really like sort of, she's always been bold and she has bold things to say and she has insightful things to say, but she didn't do the talk. She was 2 hours late. And which is very, like, I didn't realize on the first page of her book, she says, I'm always late. Read the book, that's the lesson. So I went there because I actually thought it would be informative for my book tour. I thought, gosh, I'm gonna learn from this master who's a brilliant performer and has always been such an innovator and so unique, but she didn't talk. So I didn't even.
You were on time.
What?
You were on time.
I was on time. And that's what I learned. Yes, I learned that. I just be on time. But as I started this with, I'm very punctual anyway. But so anyway, to answer your question, I wasn't there because I'm just like a fan of memoirs. I really just was curious to see her in this kind of interaction, and then it didn't happen.
What books have been